I never thought I'd hear my own son say those words to me, Dad. Maybe it's best if you leave now. And not a whisper, not a private moment. He said it right there in front of hundreds of guests, with his new wife's family standing proudly beside him, as if I was some uninvited stranger who had wandered into the wrong celebration. I froze. The music stopped in my head, even though the band kept playing. People turned, pretending not to watch, but I could feel every eye on me. My hands were still holding the small velvet box inside it, a gold watch I had worn for 40 years, the one I had planned to pass to him after the toast. "Is there a problem?" I managed to ask, my throat dry. He didn't look at me. He looked past me toward the corner table where my $200 cashier's check lay neatly tucked inside an envelope next to the gift pile. His new wife, Emily, stepped forward and smiled politely, that kind of smile that hides knives behind it. "It's just, maybe you've had enough excitement for the day," she said softly, as if speaking to a child. "We want you to rest. Rest. I'd waited my whole life for this day. I'd built it with my own hands, every brick of the house he grew up in, every late night, every loan paid off, and now I was being dismissed like a burden in front of everyone." I felt a lump rising in my throat as I looked at him. My son, my only boy, he didn't meet my eyes. He just gave a small nod, a silent command. So I walked out, slowly, one step at a time. No one stopped me. No one said a word. The sound of laughter filled the hall behind me as the doors closed. But as I reached my car, I saw that envelope on the seat, the one I had brought as a gift. $200, his future. His security. I started the engine, looked back at the wedding lights, and whispered to myself, "All right, son. You want me gone, you'll get your wish." And that's how I left my own son's wedding with tears in my eyes and $200 still in my pocket. When I left that hall, I told myself I wouldn't look back, but I did. Through the glass doors, I could still see the crowd laughing, dancing, clinking their glasses as if nothing had happened. My chair at the front table sat empty. The name card that said father of the groom fluttered in the breeze from the open door. I stood outside under the golden lights strung across the courtyard, the night air cold against my skin. My hands were trembling, but not from the weather. It was anger, shame, heartbreak. I'd spent months preparing for that wedding, paid for the venue deposit, helped with the catering costs, even covered the honeymoon flights because Emily's parents had already handled enough. Or so my son said. I didn't argue. I just wanted him to be happy. That's what fathers do. We give and hope one day our children will understand. But standing there that night, I realized he didn't. He didn't see me as his father anymore. He saw me as someone to hide someone who didn't fit the image of success he wanted to show the world. I remember sitting in my car, staring at the envelope. The weight of it felt different now. Not money, memories. Every dollar came from a lifetime of work. I ran a small construction company for 30 years, built homes for others, but never imagined my own son would make me feel homeless. As I sat there, I heard the muffled sound of cheers from inside. They were announcing the newlyweds. My chest tightened. I thought about walking back in, making a scene, shouting the truth that I had paid for half of that celebration they were now enjoying without me. But what would that change? Nothing. So instead, I started the car and drove away. The city lights blurred through my tears. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was this something had changed forever that night. And deep down, a small voice whispered, "He's not the same boy you raised." I still remember the first time my son told me about Emily. His voice was full of excitement. "Dad, she's amazing. Smart, confident. She works in finance. Her family's well off too," he said, almost proudly emphasizing that last part. I didn't think much of it at the time. Love is love, right? I just smiled and said, "If she makes you happy, that's all that matters." Back then, he still called me every day. We'd talk about work, about his plans. I thought I'd done something right, raised a good man. But as months passed, the calls got shorter. Then they stopped. When I finally met Emily, it was at a dinner her family hosted. They lived in a mansion up on the hill's marble floors, chandeliers, waiters serving wine. Her father, Mr. Thompson, was the kind of man who measured worth in dollars. The way he looked at me said it all. "So, you're in construction?" he asked, swirling his glass. Yes, I said proudly, built my business from scratch. He smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, impressive, though I imagine things have slowed down lately. Emily laughed softly. My son didn't say a word, he just looked down at his plate. That was the first time I felt something shift, something small but sharp. Over the next year, wedding plans started, but they didn't involve me much. Emily's family took control of the venue, the guest list, the decor. Every time I offered help, my son said, "Dad, let them handle it. They know how these things are done. These things." As if my way of doing things wasn't good enough anymore. Still, I kept supporting, quietly wrote checks when needed, showed up when asked, smiled when ignored. I thought it was just wedding stress. I told myself it would get better after the ceremony. But then came the rehearsal dinner the moment I realized I was already being replaced. The night before the wedding, Emily's father gave a toast to family. He said, raising his glass, "And to new beginnings may we all be blessed with prosperity and unity." Everyone clapped. Everyone except me, because I noticed something. At the head table, next to the couple, there were framed photos of both families except mine. No picture of my late wife, no old family portrait, nothing. When I asked my son about it, he said, "Oh, Dad, it just didn't fit the theme." Didn't fit the theme. Those words sliced deeper than any insult. After the dinner, I overheard Emily talking to her bridesmaids. I told him to keep things elegant. His dad means well, but you know, he's old-fashioned. They laughed. My son didn't defend me. That night, I went back to my hotel room and sat by the window, looking at the wedding suit I'd laid out. I'd been saving that suit for years. Ever since my wife passed, I imagined wearing it at our son's big day. She would have been proud. But I wondered if she'd recognize the man he'd become. Still, I promised myself I'd stay quiet, smile, and play my part. No matter what happened, I would not ruin his wedding. The next day, I kept that promise until he told me to leave. After that wedding night, I couldn't sleep. I drove aimlessly through the city until dawn, my hands gripping the steering wheel as if it could hold my life together. I ended up parking outside the old house where my son grew up, the house I built with my own 2 hands. That place had seen everything. The laughter when he took his first steps. The nights I stayed up fixing leaks and paying bills. The mornings when I'd pack his lunch, promising him he could be anything he wanted. I worked 3 jobs back, then construction during the day, security at night, and small repair gigs on weekends, all for him. When my wife, Maria, got sick, I thought the world was ending. She passed when our son was only 15. I did my best to be both mother and father. I cooked, cleaned, attended every school meeting. I still remember standing in the rain during his graduation, clapping louder than anyone else, tears mixing with the raindrops. He looked up and smiled that day. I thought it meant gratitude, maybe it did. But somewhere between then and now, that boy disappeared. As I sat outside that old house, I realized something. Everything I'd ever done, every sacrifice, every dollar saved. It had turned into a story he was ashamed of. He once told me, "Dad, people don't need to know you used to fix roofs or drive a delivery van. It's embarrassing, embarrassing." That word burned into my chest. I wanted to yell, to tell him that those roofs kept him warm, that those delivery shifts paid for his college, that every blister on my hand built the future he now bragged about. But I didn't, because I thought he'd understand one day. That day never came. Still, a part of me held on to hope until the wedding rehearsal, when I saw how completely he'd become part of Emily's world, a world where I didn't belong. It started small little signs that something was off. He began visiting less. When he did come over, he was always in a rush, talking about meetings, deadlines, clients. The easy laughter we once shared turned into short, polite conversations. Then came Emily. After they got engaged, I noticed how her family took charge of everything. At first, I didn't mind. They had money, contacts, influence, things I never cared much about. But soon, it wasn't about planning a wedding. It was about control. I'll never forget the afternoon Emily's father came to visit me at my office. He looked around at the half-finished blueprints and dusty tools. "Nice setup," he said, walking slowly. "But you must be thinking about retirement soon." "No, I shrugged. Maybe in a few years. He smiled. You should consider transferring some assets now. It'll make things easier for your son later. A wedding gift, perhaps. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. When I mentioned it to my son that night, he said, "Dad, it's not a bad idea. Emily's dad knows a lot about investments." I asked, "And what do you know about trust?" He didn't answer. A few days later, he brought a man to dinner, his lawyer friend. Apparently, they started talking about estate planning, wills, and simplifying assets. I listened quietly, then the lawyer slid a few papers toward me. "Just to review," he said, "nothing urgent." But when I glanced through them, I saw something strange. My construction company, the business I'd built from scratch, was listed under my son's name. Completely. I looked up. "What is this?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Just a proposal. Your son would be the majority shareholder, but you'd still—" I didn't let him finish. I folded the papers and pushed them back. "I'm not dead yet." My son laughed awkwardly. "Dad, don't be so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I said quietly. "I call it alive." That night, for the first time, I wondered, was my son still mine, or had he become someone else's puppet? As the wedding got closer, so did the distance between us. He stopped coming by altogether. Whenever I called, he'd say, "Busy, Dad. I'll visit soon." But soon never came. One afternoon, I decided to drop by his apartment unannounced just to see how he was doing. Emily opened the door. Her smile was polite, but her eyes said I wasn't welcome. "Oh, you didn't call first," she said, blocking the doorway slightly. "I was in the neighborhood." I replied, "Just wanted to check in." The apartment was spotless, modern, expensive. Everything screamed Emily's taste. My son sat at the kitchen counter, tapping away on his laptop. He barely looked up. "Hey, Dad," he said casually. "Can't talk long, I've got a conference call." So I sat there, feeling like a guest in my own child's life. I noticed a framed photo on the shelf, him with Emily's family on a trip to Paris. I wasn't in any of them. When Emily left the room, I asked quietly, "Son, you happy?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, Dad, it's just, you wouldn't get it. Try me." I said. He sighed. "Their world is different. You know, high expectations, image, class. I just don't want you to feel out of place around them." Out of place. That was the moment I realized he was ashamed of me. I stood up, forcing a smile. "Don't worry. I'll stay out of the way." As I walked out, I heard Emily's voice from inside. "See, that wasn't so hard. He's finally learning boundaries." I paused outside their door, my chest aching, wondering what boundaries a father should ever need with his own son. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the porch, staring at the empty chair where my wife used to sit. I whispered, "Maria, you wouldn't believe what's happening to our boy." And somewhere deep inside, I felt a storm brewing, one that I knew was only getting started. It started with polite suggestions, the kind that sound harmless at first, but chip away at your peace a little at a time. Emily's parents began visiting more often. Her mother, Patricia, was always smiling, always sweet, but there was something sharp behind that sweetness. One evening, she said, "You know, we're just worried about your future, Mr. Davis. You've worked so hard for so long. You deserve rest." I smiled politely. "Thank you, but I'm not ready to rest yet. I like staying busy." Her eyes softened, but her words didn't. "Of course, but it's time to think of your son's future too. You've built this wonderful company. Wouldn't it be beautiful if you handed it to him now, as a wedding blessing?" I didn't answer. I just stirred my coffee. But my silence must have been taken as hesitation, not refusal, because the pressure only grew from there. A few days later, my son came over with his lawyer friend again. This time, he spoke more confidently, almost rehearsed. "Dad, we've been talking about restructuring the business. It'll help with taxes and legal stuff. It's a smart move." I frowned. "Smart for who?" He sighed. "For everyone, for me, for Emily, for our future family." That word hour. It excluded me completely. When I didn't respond, his tone changed. "Dad, this is how things are done now. You've done your part. Let me take it from here." I stared at him. "Take it or take over." He looked frustrated. "Why are you being difficult? It's not like I'm stealing anything. You'll still be listed as a founder, just not in control." There it was, the truth hidden behind fancy words. He didn't want my advice or experience. He wanted my assets. I stood up slowly. Son, the day I can't run my own company is the day you'll see me in a coffin. Until then, I make my own decisions. He looked at me, jaw tight. You're being unreasonable. And you're being ungrateful, I replied quietly. That night, he left angry, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't about misunderstanding anymore. It was about greed. A week later, I got an invitation, a formal one, dinner at the Thompsons, to discuss the future. Something told me not to go. But a father's heart always wants peace, even when it hurts. So I went. Their mansion looked even grander that night, with lights strung across the entrance and servants opening the doors. I felt like an outsider stepping into someone else's world. Inside, my son and Emily greeted me warmly, too warmly. I could tell it was rehearsed. The dinner started light, filled with talk about the wedding, the honeymoon, their new life. But halfway through dessert, Emily's father cleared his throat. "Well, Mr. Davis," he began, "since the wedding is only a month away, it's a good time to finalize the transition plan." I looked up. Transition plan. My son nodded. "Dad, remember what we discussed. The papers. We just need your signature to move things forward." The lawyer slid a folder toward me, thick, official, intimidating. I opened it slowly. The first few pages were filled with terms I barely understood: equity transfer, beneficiary rights, and irrevocable authority. "Maybe I should have my own lawyer look at this," I said calmly. Emily's smile faded slightly. "Oh, there's no need for that," she said. "This is all standard. My father's firm prepared it." Her father added, "You have our word, it's just formal paperwork. It ensures your son and his wife can manage things properly." I looked at my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Do you trust me, Dad?" he asked softly. I did, or at least I wanted to. But something inside me, maybe my late wife's intuition, screamed no. I took a pen, then paused. "Tell me exactly what this does." The lawyer hesitated. "It transfers ownership to your son, permanently." I set the pen down. "So I give him everything and get nothing." He smiled nervously. "You be taken care of course. Taken care of, like an obligation." I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. "I'll think about it," I said. The room went silent. My son's jaw tightened. Emily looked embarrassed. Her father looked offended. When I stood to leave, I heard him mutter under his breath, "Stubborn old man." Maybe I was, but at least I was a man who still had his dignity. As I walked out, I heard Emily whisper, "Don't worry, he'll sign. He always gives in eventually." That night, I swore I wouldn't. After that dinner, everything changed. My son stopped calling altogether. The wedding planning continued, but I was no longer included. I wasn't invited to meetings, fittings, or even the rehearsal details until the last minute. Then came one more betrayal, quiet but cruel. I went to the company office one morning and found out my access had been restricted. My son had apparently taken temporary control of finances for organizational efficiency. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. "Dad, this is how business works now. You've been too emotional lately. You need to let go." I stared at him, speechless. "Let go?" I repeated, "Of what? My life's work." He sighed, "You don't understand. This isn't personal." I laughed bitterly. "You've made sure it is." He turned away. "Maybe you shouldn't come to the office for a while. It's confusing for the employees." I looked around the walls, the tools, the blueprints, all things I had built from nothing. And now my own son was firing me from my own company. I picked up the framed photo on my desk, me and him, when he was just 10, standing next to our first completed house. We were smiling so wide back then. I put the photo in my bag and walked out. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at my hands, the same hands that had built everything he was trying to take. And I realized love alone doesn't stop betrayal. Sometimes you have to let people destroy themselves before they see what they've lost. I poured myself another drink, opened the wedding invitation that had arrived that day, and whispered, "All right, son. You want to build your own life. Let's see how strong your foundation really is." What I didn't know then was that fate was about to turn, and soon. He'd learn what happens when a father stops being silent. A week after the wedding, I sat alone in my living room. The house was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the clock ticking, marking the seconds of an emptiness I couldn't fill. The phone hadn't rung since that night. No apology, no explanation, nothing. Then, out of the blue, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I saw a familiar face, Henry, my old friend and attorney. He'd handled my business papers years ago, before my son got involved with Emily's circle. "Henry," I said, surprised, "what brings you here?" He stepped in, hat in hand. "I heard what happened at the wedding," he said softly. "Word travels fast in small towns." We sat down, and I poured him a cup of coffee. He studied me for a moment, then asked, "You didn't sign anything they gave you, did you?" I frowned. "No, why?" Henry sighed and reached into his briefcase. "Because I got a call from a notary who used to work for the Thompsons. He said he saw some papers filed last week, ones that list your company under your son's and Emily's names." My stomach turned. "That's impossible. I never signed." "I know," he said, opening the folder, "but someone forged your signature." The room went silent. For a moment I couldn't even breathe. My own son or someone working for him had faked my name to steal my business. Henry leaned forward. I looked into it. They used an older document you'd signed years ago as reference. Sloppy work, but enough to make it look real. If we hadn't caught it now, you'd have lost everything within a month. I gripped the arm of my chair, anger bubbling through me. "So they thought I'd just fade away quietly." Henry nodded grimly. "They underestimated you." I stared at the fireplace, my hands shaking not from fear, but from fury. The kind of fury that comes when love turns into betrayal. Henry placed a second folder on the table. "I still have the old deed, the one you never changed after Maria passed. The business, the property, everything. It's still legally under your name. They can't touch it." For the first time in weeks, I felt something new power. Over the next few days, Henry and I met several times. We went through every paper, every record, every hidden clause. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became this wasn't just my son's doing. It was orchestrated by Emily's father. They had planned to merge my company into their firm, using my son as a bridge. My business name, my life's work, would have been erased. I asked Henry, "Can we stop them?" He smiled slightly. "We already have. You still hold all the primary ownership documents. Without your physical signature and identification, nothing is valid. We'll file a dispute and freeze any false claims immediately." I exhaled in relief. But that relief turned to sorrow as I stared at the photos on my wall, my son at 10, smiling beside me in a hard hat. My wife holding him in her arms. How did we get here? Henry reached into his briefcase again and handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. He said, "Your wife's original will. You asked me to keep it years ago, remember? There's something you might have forgotten." I opened it carefully, reading through the faded pages. Then my eyes stopped on one paragraph. It said that in the event of my death, half of all remaining assets should go to our future grandchildren, not directly to our son. Maria had known. Somehow, she had known this day might come. I smiled sadly. She was always one step ahead. Henry nodded. "She wanted to make sure no one could take advantage of you or the family name. That clause is ironclad." I leaned back, overwhelmed by emotion. I could almost hear Maria's voice whispering, "Don't let them break what we built." Henry closed his briefcase and stood. "You have a choice, old friend. You can expose them right now, or let them think they've won a little longer." I raised an eyebrow. "Why would I let them think that?" He smiled knowingly. "Because sometimes patience makes the fall harder." And right then, I decided I wouldn't confront them yet. I'd let them dance in their illusion. Let them believe they'd outsmarted me, because when the truth came out, it would shatter everything they'd built. A week later, my son finally called. His voice was cautious, polite as if nothing had happened. "Hey, Dad," he said, "just wanted to check in. How have you been?" I almost laughed. "Better than you'd think." I replied evenly. He hesitated. "Look, I know things got tense. I didn't mean to hurt you at the wedding. Emily thought it'd be best if your father left early." I cut in. "Yes, I remember." He went quiet. "I just wanted the day to go smoothly." "Did it?" I asked, smoothly enough to forge my name afterward. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. "Dad, don't bother," I said. "I know about the papers. I know what you tried to do." He stammered. "It wasn't like that." Emily's father said, "I don't care what he said. You're my son. You should have known better." There was a long pause. I could hear his breathing, nervous, guilty. "So what now?" he asked finally. "Now," I said, "you'll see what honesty costs and what betrayal costs more." I hung up. That night, Henry and I filed an official complaint and secured every asset under my name. The next morning, Emily's father's company received a legal notice freezing their access to my accounts and business. By afternoon, the news had spread. My phone buzzed non-stop, reporters, employees, even old friends. Apparently, the Thompsons' firm had collapsed under investigation for fraudulent filings. By evening, my son showed up at my door, pale, shaking, eyes red. "Dad, please," he said. "I didn't know they'd go this far. I swear, I was trying to protect us." I looked at him quietly. "You weren't protecting anyone. You were selling your family for convenience." Tears welled in his eyes. I made a mistake. I nodded slowly. "Yes, and mistakes have prices." He dropped to his knees. "I've lost everything, Emily, her family, the business." I stopped him. "You didn't lose everything. You just lost what was never truly yours." As he sat there crying, I felt no anger, only exhaustion. The kind that comes after carrying someone's weight for too long. I turned to him and said, "I'll help you stand again, but not as a businessman, not as a son of privilege, as a man who learns to earn back respect." He looked up, broken. "How?" I said quietly. "Start by showing up tomorrow morning. We'll rebuild the company together, but this time under my rules." The next morning, the sun rose brighter than it had in weeks. I woke up early, maybe out of habit, maybe out of purpose. For the first time since the wedding, I brewed 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. I placed the second cup across the table, waiting. A few minutes later, my son walked in. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes swollen from crying. He didn't say a word, just sat down. I pushed the cup toward him. He looked at it, then at me. "You still made me coffee." I nodded. "I've made it every morning since you left. Habit's a stubborn thing." We sat in silence for a long time. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad. I don't even know what I was thinking. I thought Emily's family was going to help us grow. I didn't realize they were using me." I sighed. "Son, I tried to warn you. When you chase wealth too fast, you forget who you're running from." He lowered his head. "I lost everything." I shook mine gently. "No, you didn't. You still have me and your mother's name to protect." His eyes filled again. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "You don't," I said honestly. "But forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something I choose to give for my own peace." He nodded quietly. "I'll make it right, Dad. I'll start from the bottom." "Good," I said, "then grab a broom. The warehouse hasn't been swept in weeks." He blinked in surprise. "You mean—" "Yes." I smiled faintly. "Every great man starts somewhere, and if you truly want redemption, it begins with humility." And so he did. Months passed. Slowly, the company began to breathe again. The scandal around the Thompsons spread like wildfire, their forgeries, their fake deals, their lies. Emily's father lost his license and his business folded. Emily herself vanished from the town, leaving behind nothing but rumors. But my son stayed. Every day he came early, worked late, and spoke little. He didn't ask for trust, he earned it. I watched him rebuild himself not as a spoiled heir, but as a man who finally understood the weight of legacy. There were days I wanted to scold him, days I wanted to hug him, but I did neither. I simply let him work, because sometimes silence teaches louder than words. One evening, as we were closing up, he said, "Dad, do you ever think Mom would forgive me?" I smiled softly. "She already has. You're still here, aren't you?" He looked away, blinking back tears. "I'll never forget what I did." "Good." I said, "Never forget it, but never let it define you." Henry stopped by occasionally, proud to see us back on our feet. He'd grin and say, "Looks like the family name survived another storm." I'd laugh, barely, but deep inside, I knew it wasn't just survival, it was transformation. The business wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours again, forged through fire and rebuilt through forgiveness. Almost a year later, on the anniversary of Maria's passing, I went to the cemetery with flowers. My son came too. We didn't speak for a while, just stood there staring at her name carved in marble. Finally, he said, "Dad, I wrote something for Mom. Can I read it?" I nodded. He unfolded a small letter, his voice trembling. Mom, I almost destroyed everything you and Dad built. I let greed blind me, but he never gave up on me just like you never gave up on him. I lost my way, but I've found my purpose again. I don't want money anymore. I want peace and family and the kind of love you both showed me. I hope wherever you are, you can see I'm trying. When he finished, he placed the letter beside the flowers. I rested my hand on his shoulder. She'd be proud of you, son. He looked at me, eyes wet. You really think so? I don't think, I said softly. I know. We stood there as the wind picked up, carrying the petals of her flowers across the grass. It felt like she was there watching, smiling, forgiving. As we walked back to the car, he asked Dad, "Do you ever regret giving me another chance?" I smiled. Never, because every father hopes for one thing, not perfect children, but children who learn. Sometimes I still think about that night, the betrayal, the humiliation, the silence that followed. But now, it doesn't sting the same way. It's a scar, not a wound. If you asked me what I learned from all this, I'd tell you this. Family isn't about blood, it's about choice. You can choose to break someone's trust, or you can choose to rebuild it. You can inherit money, but not values. I built my life brick by brick. And even when my own son tore some of those bricks down, I realized something important: the foundation, if made of love, never really collapses. We rebuilt that house of trust. It's smaller now, quieter, but it's ours. These days, when I see my son running the shop floor, greeting workers by name, checking ledgers with care, I don't see betrayal anymore. I see redemption, and every evening when we close up, he still makes 2 cups of coffee, one for him and one for me. Maybe one day he'll pass on the same lesson to his children, that forgiveness is the greatest inheritance a parent can give. They said my son deserved everything, so I gave him nothing until he learned its worth.